short introduction. Okay. Then I'm going to have to run. Then I will say. Hello, hello. Good morning.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Do you hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fabrica, those who finally woke up. It's good to see you, and it's good to see you all together after the long night. I'm really happy to welcome back again Jonathan Harris as one of our second lecture and talk today. And what to say about Jonathan? No, it's great to have, and Jonathan also is part of one of these Fabrica residents that would also be showing another part of his practice. So later on, you could see at the cinema some of his last films, The Rituals. And hopefully today, as I imagine, we're gonna a bit hear some of the early works, no? And the lecture and the talk is called From Data to Wisdom. So I really hope that we'll see the magician, no, at its highest point, and hopefully we'll see also later the films. I'm going to just do a little short bio, no, just to remind a bit about Jonathan. So he's an American artist and technologist known for his work in data visualization, documentary, and ritual. He studied at Deerfield Academy, Princeton University, and was here at Fabrica in 2000, was it?
And 4.
2004. And his work is pioneering the data visualization projects, and it includes some projects like We Feel Fine, I Want You to Want Me, and the Yahoo time capsules, which probably all of you know and remember. Starting in 2007, Harris created the interactive documentaries like The Whale Hunt and The Balloon of Bhutan, and his project Cowbird, a storytelling platform, hosted nearly 100,000 stories before it closed in 2017. And Jonathan's latest work has been focusing on ritualistic practices, on his return to his hometown or in Vermont, and that's also the part of the films that we'll see in the cinema later. And it's a series of films called in Fragments. He's currently living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and is working on Sunlight, his own company, and follows the world and teaches and delivers part of the wisdom, knowledge that I hope that will be spread today at Fabrica. Thank you very much,
All right,
Jonathan.
thanks. It's great to be back here in a place that made a huge impact on me in the year that I had here, as I'm sure it did for many of us. And it's a special joy to see so many familiar faces here. Thanks for getting up early and coming out. I'm going to talk for about an hour, and I'm going to kind of talk about these 4 different chronological chapters. Just quickly about the life I was living before coming to Fabrica, and then the data visualization chapter that really began here, and how that sort of morphed into a chapter that was more about documentary projects that had a ritualistic quality, and then the work I've been doing more in the last 7 years that I call life art, and I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So starting out, my mom was one of these moms who kept folders of all the artwork I made as a little kid, so I have like really comprehensive archives, and this is one of the first images that she collected, I think made around 1982 or 1981 when I was a couple years old. And it's actually amazing how similar this is to what We Feel Fine ended up looking like. I'll show you in a little bit. I just found this a couple years ago, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. It was like already happening. I had these stuffed animals. I found also these portraits she saved that I made of the different stuffed animals. Although the one of the bunny on the right, you see there's no matching animal, so something happened to the bunny. I'm not sure where the actual bunny ended up. But there's the puppy and the teddy bear and the little seal. And then I started working a lot with colored pencils and sort of making these imaginary worlds, probably around age 7 or 8 or something. And then I was really, really into comic books for a lot of my early adolescence, and I started making my own comic books and coming up with superheroes with different talents and powers. And then when I was in high school, I had a really wonderful art teacher named Tim England who kind of disciplined me away from doing the comic art and taught me more about more traditional drawing practices. So I did a lot of portraits of my friends around that time, and that segued into a series of pretty traditional landscape paintings in oil of the surrounding countryside where the school was located in western Massachusetts. And then once I left there, I started keeping these travel journals and sketchbooks that I kept for a number of years that were filled with watercolor paintings, but also plants and insects and ticket stubs. And these were kind of my way of processing life experience as it was happening. And I loved keeping them, and it was a huge part of my art practice for several years until in 2003, after college, I was traveling in Central America, and I got robbed at gunpoint with a gun on my head by 5 people, and got beaten up pretty badly in the robbery, and had to go to the hospital. And among the things that were stolen was the sketchbook that I was working on at the time, which was about a year of work. And I kind of took it as a sign from the universe to change directions. And it just happened that that time coincided with the acceptance to Fabrica. So I came over here to Italy and ended up landing with Andy Cameron in the interactive department. And this is a fun picture of some familiar faces here. Vladimir is here in the audience, and then dear Andy, who sadly passed away some years ago. Yeah, really went in a different direction. So this was actually the work I made on my trial, was a project called Word Count that was a visualization of the most frequently used 88,000 English words arranged as a very, very long sentence, and you could navigate through it and zoom in on different sections or search for a certain word. And as you can see, it's like the aesthetic couldn't be more different than those tactile travel journals with insects and plants. But this was kind of the Fabrica medicine for me, was recalibrating my sense of aesthetics to this very kind of clean, minimal, reduced, data-based vision. And I did also this project here when I was at Fabrica called 10 by 10, which automatically constructs these mosaic of news images every hour based on analysis of news websites, and then also selects 100 words for that hour based on the language being used in news articles at the time. So again, a very different aesthetic from the tactile travel journals. When I left Fabrica and went to New York, I did a series of projects in the same vein. This one was called Phyllotaxis, and it was showing science news. This one was called Universe, and it was choosing new constellations for the night sky, also by analyzing news coverage and sort of celebrity culture, and wondering, like, what are the modern myths of our time? You know, it's not Orion the Hunter and Artemis, but it might be politicians and celebrities and large sagas that are affecting us all. This one was commissioned by the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2008. It was called I Want You to Want Me, and it visualized thousands of online dating profiles as silhouetted figures acting out different domestic vignettes while trapped inside of pink and blue balloons. And it was on a big 6-foot-tall touchscreen, and you could touch the balloons, and the weather systems would change, and it was really this like celebration of the humanity hiding inside of the internet and inside of data. But probably the best known project from this time was We Feel Fine, so I'm going to spend a little more time focusing on this one, just for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It was a project I made with my good friend Sepp Kamvar. We both were at Princeton together. And it was basically a search engine for feelings. So the way that it worked is we wrote a program that scanned all the newly posted blog entries in the world, and every 2 or 3 minutes, it would look for new posts that had the phrase I feel or I am feeling, and it would then collect that sentence and try to identify whatever demographic information it could about the author, so like their age and their gender and their geographic location. And then it would visualize all these feelings as this rainbow-colored particle system. And I can show you, although the data is old because it's not running anymore, but this is the interface that I designed for the data, and all these rainbow-colored particles represent sentences. So you can actually click them and see, you know, the phrases that go inside. I get why it makes them feel deep, even though they are still reading kiddie comic books. I feel like emoing at LJ and not Blogger. I've learned that it's hard to determine where to draw the line between being nice and not hurting people's feelings and standing up for what you believe. So there's literally tens of millions of these now. And in the interface, the feelings display human qualities. So you can see some of them showing curiosity right now and hovering around the mouse cursor. And then if I hold down the cursor and move around, they show fear, and they run away from me. Then the color of the feelings represents the type of emotion inside, so the brighter, warmer colors are more positive, and the cooler colors are more negative. And then there's all these different movements. So that one was called madness. This one is called murmurs, where you can see the feelings come down in this kind of stock ticker aesthetic, typing out one by one. There's a montage that shows feelings that have photographs inside. Oh, I'm not on the internet here. So anyway, that's why the photos aren't loading. But anyway, this one is mobs, which is showing the most common feelings in this particular time frame of this data set. And then you can also see gender breakdowns, age breakdowns, weather breakdowns, and a world map of where they're coming from. And then metrics shows you a more kind of financialized view of things. So you can see that people are feeling bored at 4.6 times the usual level in this data set, and compelled at 2.5, and so on. And then mounds shows the most common feelings overall as these jelly blobs. And you can scroll through this list here, and or scroll to the end and see the 4,545 people who feel unwanted or screwed or irritated. And then there's also this search function where you can zoom in on different demographics, like women feeling absorbed in their 30s in the rain in a certain country and certain date range. So anyway, it was kind of demonstrating this way in which the internet was really a very human place, which at the time was not well understood. This was like 2005, 2006. And I think for a lot of people, this project helped people to see the kind of human potential hiding in this big data that was being produced. Nowadays, of course, it's gone the other way, and we're so overwhelmed by data, and we talk of filter bubbles and fake news and internet addiction, so the world is so different now. But at the time, there was a lot of excitement around this new way of seeing humanity as a kind of evolving meta-organism through the internet data that we were all producing. So I'll show you a few of the images that weren't loading there. These are some highlights that I particularly like. I feel like I'm diagonally parked in a parallel universe. I feel so much of my dad alive in me that there isn't even room for me. I feel like Andrew has abandoned me. I understand how it feels to be rejected. I just want to feel alive for the first time in my life. I feel so happy, man, this had better last. I can feel my cancer grow. I cried in my pillow that night for hours, feeling angry, disappointed, and frustrated, knowing I would never get to see my father again. I feel loved. I feel free. I feel pretty. I need to be in some backwoods redneck town so that I can feel beautiful. I feel skinny, but I'm not. I wouldn't hide it if society didn't make me feel like I needed to. I'm 23 and a recovering meth and heroin addict and feel absolutely blessed to still be alive. I feel like I'm in the center of that light circle. I can't wait to see them racing for the first time at Daytona next month because I feel the need for speed. I feel sassy. I feel so naughty. I feel these weirdos are actually an asset to college life. I love how I feel today. So as you see from this, this was a very different time when people were so emotive and open. It was almost like keeping a diary in public in this glory day of blogging around that era of 2005. And what a different internet today with these corporate platforms that have kind of consolidated and channeled our attention. And we know that we're being manipulated by algorithms and marketed to. And it just has a totally different cultural subtext now than it did 20 years ago. So another thing that came out of this project was a book that Sepp and I made together with Simon & Schuster that allowed us to go much deeper into the kind of data insights hiding in all of these feelings. So this spread from the book here shows the top feelings over a 3-year time period. So you see better is that orange line that always dominates and is the most common feeling. And then bad and good are the next two, and those three sort of tower over all the rest. One of the interesting insights here is you can see that the bad line, the blue line, is declining, and the yellow good line is rising, so they switch and change places. And at first we wondered, like, why are people getting happier? What do we attribute this to? But actually it was that the population was getting older. That's that dotted line. And one of the strongest emotional trends that we found, but that's also widely known in the sociology literature, is that people tend to get happier as they get older. So we actually think that's what accounts for that flip of bad and good. This is shades of emotion, so ranging from really euphoric in the red here, I like him, that's why I feel so thrilled, and then very dark, I was feeling suicidal and started cutting. So it's sort of this whole landscape of emotion that people have been feeling through these blog sentences. This is showing moods, which are clusters of emotions over the course of a typical lifetime. So each of these charts is a cluster of feelings that you see in the light gray, grouped under these headings like joy and sadness. So you can see what I was talking about with happiness. So the joy graph is like pretty steadily rising up until the mid-50s, and then it kind of plateaus at that point. Whereas some of these other really strong emotions like anger and disgust and sadness are very high when you're a teenager, and then they quickly plummet out and remain pretty low for the rest of the life. This is summarizing a typical human lifetime in one sentence based on the data analysis. We call this a life sentence. We start simple but soon fill up with angst and feelings of confinement until we leave those behind to go conquer the world. Fabrica, before gradually trading ambition for balance, developing an appreciation for our bodies and our children, and evolving a sense of connectedness for which we feel grateful, then happy, calm, and finally blessed. This is showing how time at different intervals affects emotions. So the top row is some news events that were happening at the time. The second row is Valentine's Day on the left. So Valentine's Day shows very strong spikes in feeling loved and special, but the biggest spike of all is in feeling lonely. And that lasts for a few days after Valentine's Day. Here you can see another take on loneliness, the lonely weekends. So Monday is the lowest lonely time, and then the loneliness rises throughout the week, peaking on a Sunday evening. Joy is highest around just before you eat lunch, and then it plummets through the rest of the day. And sadness rises once you eat lunch up till bedtime. So good to have a light lunch. This is a geography of emotion showing how the feelings are distributed across the United States, which is where the bulk of the data comes from because it's English language. So you can see basically a population map on the left, and then these are some state-by-state comparisons. So the purple one here, these are people that feel things about God. So you can see the Bible Belt in the Deep South. People who feel sick a lot, it's a lot of the colder northern states. This is people who talk about feeling fat a lot, and this is an obesity map of the US, and they're actually like inverse. So the states that talk about feeling fat the most are like some of the most healthy states, people obsessing about their bodies and their weight, which was kind of an interesting thing to see in the data. Anyway, I'm going to keep moving on here. So basically did a lot of these data projects and started to feel like a little overloaded sitting behind computers the whole time. I was just spending my life constantly typing into laptops, and I started to sort of hunger for physicality and real-world experience again. But I was still very interested in this kind of algorithmic way of thinking. And so the way that went for me is I started doing these ritual documentary projects where instead of writing computer programs to gather data following an algorithm, I would come up with rules for myself to follow and then go out into the world and use those rules to gather data myself and then bring them back and make websites. The first experiment in this chapter was called the whale hunt that involved going up to Barrow, Alaska for 2 weeks and living with a family of Inupiat Eskimos during their spring whale hunt, and setting up the rule for myself that every 5 minutes for those 2 weeks I would take a photograph, and then when my heartbeat got fast because of exciting things happening, I would ratchet up that frequency up to about 40 or 50 photographs in a 5-minute period. And that ended up producing around 4,000 images that document this 2-week experience that I built a whole interface where you can explore them and see different themes within that data set. And I'm not going to show it just in the interest of time, but you can check it out. It's still online at thewhalehunt.org. A similar project in this chapter was Balloons of Bhutan that involved going to the Himalayan... Oh, did that... there we go, that involve going to the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, that uses gross national happiness instead of gross national product to talk about their national objectives, and interviewing people about happiness by asking them to rate their level of happiness between 1 and 10, and then blowing up that number of colored balloons and handing them to the person, and taking portraits of them, asking them to make a wish and write the wish on one of the balloons that were then strung up in this prayer mountain pass at Dochula after the 2 weeks were up. This is another project in that chapter called I Love Your Work that was shot in New York City over, again, a 2-week period by following around 10 queer porn actresses while they were filming a production and spending 24 hours with each one, and then every 5 minutes taking 10 seconds of video of whatever was happening at that moment, whether it was grocery shopping, riding a taxi, sleeping on set, and again, then building one of these interactive interfaces that allow you to scan through all this data. And then ultimately, I kind of turned back to myself and my own life and started the very simple practice of taking a photo and writing a story every day and posting those online each night before going to sleep. And I started that on my 30th birthday, and I continued that for 440 days. And I'd like to just show you the film that came out of that. It's about an 8-minute film that shows you the 440 images that were produced in that 1.5-year period with a kind of vocal commentary on some reflections on the process. I think it was kind of a turning point project for me, as you'll see some of the later work. So I think it's good to spend a little time looking at this. So maybe we could dim the lights, and I'll just play this. Is that working? It's okay? Yeah, these early ones were, there's like a panic every day trying to figure out, what the photo is going to be. But it's like every day there would always be something, somehow things would work out. I wanted to find a way to be more in the moment, to be more in every day, to understand time more, to understand my own life more, to have more memories, all of these things, basically to live more richly as a human life, not just as a work life. And so I designed this project to take a picture every day, and I thought it would make me more aware of life as it was passing. It was like it gave me this enhanced awareness for life. At first, it was just my family and close friends that were following it, and then over the months, more and more people signed up until there was an audience of a few thousand strangers following it all around the world. It's kind of like a hunt. I mean, when I see these pictures in this sequence, 1 per second like this, it feels a lot like hunting. Like there's got to be some endpoint or some outcome. It's like a step, a step, a step, a step, and at some point you're going to reach your prey and you're going to pounce on it and kill it. But having gone through it, I can tell you there was no prey that I ever got to pounce on and kill. It was just a walkabout. I always think there's going to be such a clear endpoint with things, with life. Not always an endpoint, but a clear signal of like, okay, yes, this is clearly the thing to be doing now, no doubt about it. But it's so rare that I ever feel that certainty. Much more often, I'm just aimlessly wandering from one thing to the next. You just never really know. It just feels so random sometimes, everything. This project was definitely a crutch for memory. It was like an assisted living center for memory. I'm really obsessed with memory. I'm obsessed with not forgetting, not being forgotten. And I do all sorts of things to try to fix that. This project was one. I think all my projects are about leaving a mark, being remembered somehow, or remembering the marks that other people have left. But you can't ever really win at it, you know. No matter what you do in your life, what you create, what career you have, whether you have a family or kids or make a lot of money or whatever, your greatest creation is always going to be your life story, because it's like this container that holds all of those other things. That was something I was really interested in with this project, like thinking of life itself as a creation, as a story that you're writing. When I reached 30, I think I felt what a lot of people feel when they reach 30 or around this age, which is that maybe the way your life isn't the way you thought your life was going to be when you were 20 or when you were 15. And you kind of freak out a little bit and you wonder, you know, holy crap, like I'm aging, I'm getting older, and I still have all this stuff that's not figured out. It's strange. It's almost like the process of growing up has made me, well, almost like less sure of myself somehow, because I see there's so much more that I don't know, which I didn't see before, I think. I feel like I've definitely grown probably more in this last year than I've grown in any other year in my life, and I think it's largely because of doing this project. I think it was an incredible instrument for personal growth, among many other things. But that said, I'm not sure exactly what I've grown into. Took on this kind of performative quality a little bit, whether I wanted it to or not. And that was a really strange thing to experience. It became something that took more and more control over me. And by the end, it was more like the project was running my life, not the other way around. I wanted to stop it. I wanted some time to contemplate and process experience without having to post about it every single night to other people. And just some space, I think. And I miss it now too. I miss having this archive of memories. I feel my memory atrophying already, getting weaker than it was. I use stories as a technique to organize the past, and I think there's a real lack of storytelling now among all of us. Like, we're all living lives that are so fragmented and so moment to moment. What's happening now? What's the latest text message? What's the latest news blurb? It's all so moment that there's not that time to create stories, to make sense of your experience. I think that's one big thing I learned doing this project, is that you really need privacy. I think you need space in order to contemplate and grow. Stopped with the 30 birds, going into the brush where you couldn't see what was next. You could call the whole thing Men at 30. Different ways of dealing with that, you know. I mean, the today is just a coping mechanism, I think. boy meets world, boy still baffled. Something like that. Thank you. Thanks for watching that. So that project completed in 2011, and starting around that time, I was still basically doing internet projects. I was running this storytelling community called Cowbird that Carlos mentioned, but really my heart wasn't in it anymore. I noticed that the works of art that moved me the most almost always happened in mediums that were different than the medium that I was working within, which was the internet and digital art. Whether it was films or novels or songs or performances, I felt that the work being created in other mediums touched me in much deeper ways. And I wasn't sure how to respond to that or how I could take my practice into a different direction. Around that same time, I started a real process of spiritual seeking. This is around 2012 to 2015. I was doing a lot of meditation retreats and reading a lot of philosophy, exploring psychedelics and plant medicine for the first time. And through a series of experiences that I had during that chapter, which was very infertile creatively, I sometimes talk about it as a time of real stuckness. There was a lot happening within, and ultimately I had a series of experiences that were very harrowing and challenging in some of these ceremony spaces that really broke down my whole sense of reality and of belief in the world even. And I was even considering taking a vow of silence and kind of entering more of a monastic path. But around that time, I was fortunate to meet a mentor named Ernesto Pujol, a Cuban-American former monk and performance artist, who said to me, the Buddhists say that this is all an illusion. Well, if that's true, then why not make beautiful illusions? And it kind of woke up something in me and really started thinking about life as the medium, in a way, like this creative medium that we're all inside of right now in this moment and every moment, and that in some way we're having this co-creative relationship with life as it unfolds through where we put our attention, through where we set our intentions, through what we do with our time. And in some way, beyond the frame of photographs or films or websites or books, there is life, which is this thing we're all strangely embedded within. And I became really interested in thinking about life as this medium, and then wondering, well, what are the tools you can use for working with life? And ended up arriving at ritual as a kind of tool or technology for a symbolic language of working with a life situation. And around that time, I decided to move home to Vermont, to the land where I was born, this small town called Shelburne. And my mom died the day that I moved home after a long illness. She died about 2 hours after I finished unloading the moving truck. I was with her in her bed with my sister. The sun was going down behind the Adirondack Mountains, and we had Wagner's Parsifal opera playing, which is the only music she wanted to listen to in the last several months of her life, which, as some of you probably know, is the story of the knights who guard the Holy Grail and are searching for eternal life. Anyway, I sort of found myself like back in this small town, my mom dying, and then along with my sister inheriting this nearly 200-acre farm in rural Vermont that had been in our family since the 1880s. And the farm has 9 historic outbuildings, almost 200 acres of land. It's a place of tremendous natural beauty. And at the same time, it was a place that had harbored a lot of difficult history. Both my mom and her father had died in that house that you see there after about 20 or 25 years of solitary hermetic living. And both had struggled with alcohol addiction and depression and divorce. And it just felt like a very complicated legacy to be receiving, and also a place of great potential. And so I basically started thinking about that life situation as the frame for exploration of life art, which I then ended up working on for the next 7 years through this project that came to be known as In Fragments. And I'm going to just kind of walk you through some images from the various rituals and talk about how the process unfolded, and then I'll show a couple film clips after that. So this is, first of all, a picture of my mom as a little girl, actually on the other side of that lake in the Adirondacks. And I love this picture of her with the hula hoop because it feels like she's sort of caught in this cycle of time and of intergenerational patterns that keep getting passed down. And in some way, it was like trying to find a way out of this. I started with a lot of meditation on the lake itself, which is this very primordial presence there. It's called Lake Champlain. It's a 500 million-year-old lake. And in the shores of this lake, which has all of these different moods and seasons depending on the time of year, there are these limestones, these stones of gray shale with white veins of calcite running through them. And the stones have a really beautiful geology, which is that that whole area used to be located down by the equator, and it was covered by a shallow tropical sea, and there was clay building up on the bottom of that ocean. And in the water were these little creatures that would use the calcium floating in the water to create their structures, their shells and their coral bodies and so on. And then when those creatures would die, their bodies would go back into the water, dissolved calcium. When there was seismic activity, cracks would emerge in the bedrock, and the water would travel down into those cracks, carrying the dissolved bodies of these creatures. And when all of that lake evaporated, 200 million years later, what were left were these long white veins running through the bedrock, and then that bedrock would break up into these small stone fragments that you find on the beach that to me are like puzzle pieces that point at this long-forgotten wholeness when these lines used to connect. And they actually represent the bodies of the creatures that once lived in this place long before humans. So I was very interested in the symbol of these stones as, in a way, a symbol of that place, but also a metaphor for all of us as kind of fragments of some larger whole that we can perhaps reconnect with somehow. So some of the early rituals were very crude, examples at trying to recreate that wholeness by lining up the stones in a row of like 1,000 of them along the beach. And then this one was using this biblical term of the Urim and Thummim, which is an ancient notion of seeing stones that you can receive prophecies through. So putting these stones over my eyes and actually like one into my mouth. And then trying to crush them up into a powder to get at an undifferentiated state where the stones are not so separate anymore, but they start to merge on a smaller particle level. And then sorting that powder in different ways, examining it, trying to understand it more. Then gathering a series of these stones and traveling around America to visit with different mentors and people who have been important to me. One of the people I visited with was actually Godfrey Reggio, the original director of Fabrica, who now lives in Santa Fe, where I live. This is my dad. And then putting a line of the stone powder on each of those people's faces as a way of kind of inviting their spirit into this ritual series that I was working on. Then I started exploring the plane of perception. This is a ritual called equidistant that involves putting a sheet of glass in front of the camera and then throwing different fluids against the sheet of glass to interrupt your process of viewing, calling attention to the way in which, like in every moment, we have this notion of depth, like the mountains are further away than the tree, and so on. But in another way of looking, they're all equal on a plane of perception that we're engaging with in each moment. So I was interested in that collapsing of depth into this process of looking. Another way of doing that was noticing this fluid dynamics of dust clouds and a sunbeam coming into the barn hayloft. Then I created an effigy of my mom with her clothing and carried it around the land into different locations and had the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono prayer, which is a prayer of love and forgiveness that was sung by some female friends of mine as this was happening as a way of working with her spirit. This is the mirrored eyes of the scarecrow effigy. This is the scarecrow lying in her bed in the place where she died. This is actually her cremation, which I decided to film, and this took place in a local crematorium in Burlington, a neighboring town in Vermont. And after she died, I started this process of ritual glassmaking with a local friend who was a master glassblower who had trained in Venice. And we set out to create our own glass from scratch using locally gathered ingredients and also mixing in my mother's cremated remains into the glass mixture and building a hillside furnace. And this process took us 7 months. This is gathering the quartzite, which is the main source of silica in a nearby mountain range. This is crushing up that quartzite using my grandfather's anvil and sledgehammer into a powder. This is beginning work on the hillside furnace, an 18-foot-long clay cob furnace that I built in the hillside with Ethan's help. And this is firing and curing the furnace. We have a leaf blower here going into a long iron pipe, which is a way of accelerating the airflow into the fire chamber to get the furnace up to heat. This is, again, curing the furnace. This is the night we made glass, November 1st, 2016. And the process was about 28 hours of firing this furnace and getting it hotter and hotter. And then one of this amazing thing happened in the middle of the night was a phoenix shape started to appear in the door into the furnace with the flames shooting out, seeking oxygen through a hole in the clay cob door and then the sides of that door like wings. And this is ultimately the glass vessel that came out of that furnace that was used as a kind of magical tool in some of the future rituals. This one was involving my own story about myself and my past identities. So I basically set up 10 body-length mirrors on this easel late one night, and then I wore 10 different outfits that represented different identities I had worn over the years, and then one by one I approached the mirror wearing that outfit, and then using my grandfather's hammer, I broke that reflection. And then at the end of the night, burned all of the pieces in this bonfire. Then the next morning, went back to the site of where that happened and gathered up the pieces and brought them into the hayloft of that red barn and arranged the pieces in this large 27-foot-long mosaic that was kind of a way of reclaiming all those identities, but on my own terms, in a new way, not just destroying them, but finding a new relationship with them as this larger whole. This next ritual dealt more directly with my grandfather's trauma from World War II. He was a pilot in the war, and he had carried a lot of wounded troops back from the front, and they would be screaming in the back of the airplane with blown-off legs, and apparently he was very haunted by these memories, and he would have nightmares and wake up in the middle of the night screaming, and then the way he would deal with that is he would put on his old uniform from the war, and he would make himself alcohol drink and would, at 3 or 4 in the morning, just drink alone in the house wearing his old uniform. And I was very haunted by that image and the experience of how that pattern was still playing out on our land. So I wanted to do a ritual to address that, so I borrowed his uniform from the collection of a local museum and wore it. And using his parachute from the war, I sort of recreated this experience of falling through the sky here on the land. And then I took 100 of his alcohol bottles that we still had and lined them up next to 100 of my childhood G.I. Joe action figures in this building that has all these animal heads of animals that he shot in Alaska in the 1930s as witnesses. And then I made a concoction of the 100 alcohols and took a sip of it. And then using a stove, I boiled off that alcohol mixture and captured the vapor in this upside-down bottle. And then the next morning, brought that bottle out into the lawn area and using his rifle, shot that and shattered it as a way of freeing those spirits back into the landscape. This was a ritual that dealt with my mom's trauma. She kept dream journals for 12 years when she was in psychotherapy, and many of them were nightmares, very, very difficult to read. I discovered them after she died. And for this ritual, I hung them up in the forest in a maple sugaring grove as if they are receiving the sweet spring sap, and then set up this white bed with her childhood baby doll, baby Linda, who was left out there overnight to sleep among these dreams being aired out. And then the next morning, put the dreams in a stack on a sheet of glass, and then arranged my mother's old paperweights until the sheet of glass broke. and then 3 doves that were released by the local man who did her cremation, who also works with doves, were released from behind the hill as a way of kind of symbolically releasing those spirits that were being held in those journals. And then along with my little nieces, who were 6 years old at the time, we turned those journals into paper kites and flew the kites in the Easter sky so they could be aired out in the sunlight. And the drawings you see on those pages were made by my little niece, Julia. This was a ritual for closing the cowbird storytelling community that I referenced earlier. It ran for about 6 years and gathered about 100,000 stories from people all around the world. But then, as growing awareness of screen addiction and kind of unhealthy behavior dynamics around the internet became more and more present in that platform, I decided it was a good time to close it and keep it as an archive. And there were a lot of like super fan authors that were very sad about that decision. And so I invited some of the kind of most prolific authors from that platform to come to the land in Vermont and do an in-person gathering for a weekend where we told stories around the bonfire and cooked together and got to know each other actually as physical beings. And then I did this ritual where I took about 40 of my mother's silver frames and hung them in this grove of maple trees, and then invited each author to take a frame home as a present. And the frames were empty frames now, and just by holding up the frame and looking, it was a way of helping people see that they didn't need to post about their experience on the internet anymore. Just by noticing, that was enough. So this one was called A Witness to Life. This next ritual involved, again, working with my grandfather's legacy. He had established the farm, and he had left behind this birch bark canoe that was about 150 years old, and it had all of these rips and tears and holes in it, so it wasn't seaworthy anymore. And so I used the traditional method of pine resin and bacon fat to glue up the rips in this canoe, and then took it out onto the lake with the broken mirror shards recollected from that mosaic in the hayloft, and then as an offering gave these mirror shards to the lake where the whole project had begun, as I showed you at the beginning. And when you zoom out and see this shape of the canoe on the lake with the buckets of mirrors, it's almost like an eye looking up with the pupil. And then you see the surface of this glassy body. So anyway, it's a very different project than the data work or even than the daily photos. Much more esoteric and personal, but it's something I felt I needed to do to come to my own relationship with that land and the family story and the family inheritance. So I'll just show you quickly the trailer for this. It's about a minute, and then I'll talk about one more of the rituals in a little more depth. So maybe we could do the lights again. So the final ritual in this series involved trying to anchor in a new energy pattern on that land that was not inherited but more consciously intended. And the way that worked out was creating this network of 27 lightning transformers, these custom designed implements that have these copper points, which are called air terminals. That's what you see on the tops of buildings to attract lightning so it doesn't destroy the building. So these copper points attached to a steel frame and a glass mirror with a laser engraved geometry on the mirror, anchored into the ground, going 2 feet underground with certain special objects buried. And there's a network of 27 of these installed over about 40 acres of land, encompassing most of High Acres Farm now. And they're to be found in different locations. Each mirror is unique and shows a geometry of the overall network with one of the nodes circled, indicating the location of that particular transformer in the overall network. And then also a word, which is like a prayer or an intention. And there's 27 of these words, one for each sign. And the geometry was very much inspired by early American quilt design that my great-grandmother Electra had collected, and she started a local museum with a lot of that collection. And this series here was called Electric Web, as a reference to her. Her name was Electra Webb, so this is called the Electric Web. And this is a map of the 27 transformers and where they're to be found on the land and all of the words that are associated with each one. So they're basically this energetic quilt woven into the landscape. And the way that it's designed to work is that when one of these transformers attracts a lightning strike in a summer storm, the electricity circles the copper wire that's installed on each mirror and then travels down another copper wire going 3 feet into the ground as a way of charging the land, not just with electricity, but with electricity that's been altered by the prayer that's on that particular mirror. So it's kind of an energy mandala to impregnate the land with this set of prayers or intentions. And I'll show you also the film for this to give you a sense of where these are and how they all work together. This is about a 5-minute one. As I sometimes like to say, the things you get up to when you move to the country. Anyway, for any of you interested in seeing more of this, there's going to be a screening, I think starting at 2 o'clock today, of a subset of the films. It's about an hour-long cut. The full set is about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and you can see them online also, but if you're interested. And then I'm just seeing about time, so we're pretty much out. Okay, so I'm going to skip a part and go to another part. So I'm just going to close by sharing this little map that I like to use for thinking about how to give your attention. You know, so often we like to think about these big world problems that are happening, but we haven't tended to how our body's feeling, or our home environment, or our family, or our community. And I know I saw that so much, especially in my earlier life when I was traveling the world a lot. So this is a map I call Circles of Care, and it has a little text that goes with it, so I'll just read this as I go through it. Begin with your body. How does it feel? Does it need movement, a nap, or a meal? Or does it feel rested, nourished, and fit, prepared for the actions to which you'll commit? Move on to your mind. What is its state? Is it filled up with worries and wishes and hates? Or does it feel empty, steady, and clear, ready to welcome whatever appears? And now to your home. Do you love where you live? Is it asking for something it needs you to give? Or does it support you with shelter and heat? Is it grounding and joyful and cozy and neat? And now to the people who share the same place, your family, your neighbors, the others you face. What are they working to nurture and grow? How can you offer to share what you know? And then to your network of resonant peers, the friendships you've gathered over the years. Wherever they live, is there something they need? Can you pose the right question, plant the right seed? And then to the planet, this world that we share, with its structures and systems and circles of care, each of us playing our own little part, finding our medicine, messages, art. For what is this world but a series of lives, reflecting each other with myriad eyes, each with their lenses and visions and views, each with the feeling of needing to choose? And what is this world but a story we tell, a dream with no end, an alarm with no bell, to wake from the story and see it as such, to swim in the dream and savor the touch? These circles of care, an invisible map, to help us awaken, embody, adapt, to the story of life that we choose to create and the world that emerges to which we relate. From body to mind, to home, to community, to network and planet, for total immunity, from believing too much in the story of you, apart from the world that you call into view. For you're in the world, and the world is in you. You make it. It makes you. It's ancient, it's new. So what feels alive, most fertile and true? What are you sensing, and what will you do? Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, I really appreciate your attention today. I know that was a strange and circuitous journey that we went on. This is some ways you can get in touch with me if you want. And hope you all have a wonderful rest of the reunion, and see you